Oh, McQueen. Crazy McQueen. McQueen and I got along pretty good. McQueen looked at me kind of like an older brother.
Have you ever thought about what transpires behind the dazzling screen of Hollywood? Beyond the glittering lights and the captivating stories are murky waters of competition tension and unspoken truths. James Garner has been telling this story for decades, but it wasn't just the performances that identified him. He had a tempestuous relationship with one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Steve McQueen. But what really happened between these two icons on the set of The Great Escape? Make no mistake, rivalry existed, so fierce that it affected their careers and left a long turn of unspoken feuds, is a story that is about to be told long after both of their deaths. But the real truth, the shocking revelations, has yet to be shared. Stay tuned with us as we silence what really happened between James Garner and Steve McQueen. James Garner's path to Hollywood could not have been less conventional. James Scott Bumgar was born on April 7, 1928, in Denver, Oklahoma, and he did not have a straightforward childhood. Losing his mother at age 5 was just the tiny beginning. Garner's mother's death was the result of a botched abortion and left his father, Weldon Bumgar, to raise him and his two brothers. Life was only going to get more difficult for the boys. Weldon was a hardware store owner but wasn't able to provide for the family. Then he lost the store in a fire and resorted to alcohol to cope. The outcome was tragic. At this point, Garner and his brothers were neglected and endured cruelty by his stepmother. Wilma further added to the burden with disdain, often treating them with outright cruelty, particularly forcing James to wear girls' clothes as a form of humiliation. In this environment of toxicity, Garner was left with lasting scars but also developed a resilient attitude towards life. At the age of 14, Garner had finally had enough. After a particularly violent confrontation with his stepmother, he fought back to defend himself, while his father intervened to separate him and Wilma from even more physical conflict. It was a major turning point in his short personal history that ensured he would face life on his own terms. Not long after this encounter, Garner's father abandoned the family and the three brothers were left to figure things out on their own, a personal tragedy that always weighed heavy on Garner in life. However, through all that, Garner managed to scramble his way through life, starting with odd jobs, to then serving in the Merchant Navy for about 6 months until chronic seasickness caused him to quit, and so on. Garner's early years in life are best described as a struggle, but in 1950, during the Korean War, he got his big break when he was indeed drafted into the U.S. Army to ultimately serve in the Korean War. Garner did not have an easy time in the Army either. He got injured by mortar shrapnel just days after arriving, and later on wound up acquitting with friendly fire, despite knowing he was in what he described a permissive, lax-at-war situation. Garner behaved like someone who had no sense of heroism or glory in his service. He almost shunned it. Nonetheless, his experiences in the war were foundational in the person he would later become. They also included a bizarre new survival mechanism, the aforementioned aversion to garlic. And this strange development during his Korea experiences would literally save his life when he turned down a poisoned meal because of its garlic content. After returning from the war, Garner would experience a series of odd jobs, gas station, underwear model, but his fortune would change when he met Paul Gregory, soon to be his agent. Gregory saw something in Garner that made him push him to pursue a career as an actor. At first, Garner considered it absurdity, but he changed his life later on when he saw Gregory's name on a sign outside a talent agency. As it turned out, this meeting would change Garner's life forever. Garner's first role in the Minutes was very small, but it simply opened the door to bigger offers and much larger roles. Before long, he was co-starring with Marlon Brando in the movie Sayonara. But it was 1957 when casting him as Brett Maverick in Maverick when his career took off. The show was doubtful at first, but ultimately gained fame and was a smash hit. Garner's uniqueness and timing saw him rise to stardom. But he did not escape his problems. Garner's disillusionment with Hollywood. When James Garner left Maverick, it went beyond a career choice, but it was a direct response to his frustrations with the Hollywood engine. In 1960, Hollywood was rocked by a writer's strike. As a result, production stopped on a number of television shows, including Maverick. Garner had become a star, albeit a rising one. but was still only earning $1,250 a week when the studio let him go because they had no scripts. Garner felt he'd been treated unfairly. What followed was a bold and groundbreaking action. Garner sued Warner Brothers for breach of contract. Hollywood was shocked, but Garner wanted to stand up for himself, and he was not afraid to do so. His legal action sent a strong message. He was not going to allow Hollywood studios to dictate his career. Garner was successful in his lawsuit, and his legal victory started to resonate within the business. Warner offered Garner a new contract and an increase in salary, but Garner had lost faith in the studio system. He felt like a puppet on a string run by corporate suits, and he took a bold step in leaving Maverick. Despite the loss of their star, Maverick continued. Although the show lost its touch once Garner left, the studio brought in an actor who looked very similar, Robert Colbert, to replace him, and then introduced characters such as Bo Maverick and a young Roger Moore. And audiences didn't react well to it, and the show lost its magic. As Garner moved on to other projects, there were echoes of his absence. The fight with Steve McQueen. Garner's 1963 film, The Great Escape, became one of his most iconic roles. This film, based on a true story, centers on a group of prisoners of war who escaped from a German POW camp during World War II. Garner's character, Henley, is the charm and resourcefulness of the group, while Steve McQueen's character, the Cooler King, exemplifies the rebel. The film is notable for its ensemble cast, which included some great actors, such as Charles Bronson and James Coburn. But the undercurrent of drama was behind the scenes. Steve McQueen was still rising in Hollywood when he was hoping to make a name for himself in The Great Escape, but was having difficulty with his desire to get more screen time. McQueen was frustrated with his character, and he wanted to be noteworthy, and he was a passionate advocate for changes to his character. John Sturges, the director, recognizing that he had a star on the rise, made changes to McQueen's character and included the now famous motorcycle escape. This sequence elevated McQueen and established him to the next level of notoriety. It wasn't only the action or character changes that created tension. It was McQueen's behaviors, the aloofness, and the eccentricities that began to create a wedge between him and Garner. Although McQueen arrived to set in a Rolls-Royce and lived in a private chalet, Garner was pragmatic, putting in work and spending time with crew and other actors. Garner's honesty about McQueen's actions in his book, The Garner Files, reveals a picture of a man who is insecure and jealous. He described McQueen as a pain in the ass and noted his behavior was as unpredictable as Marlon Brando's. Despite the clashes, Garner didn't think McQueen was inherently malicious, just insecure. Although this was understandable in a sense, his fears and lack of faith in himself made it challenging to work together. At one point, McQueen even falsely accused him of having an affair with his wife Nyla. This kind of situation further distanced them from each other. But Garner retained some empathy for McQueen, as he saw this as the manifestation of these insecurities. The dark side of Hollywood. In his memoir, The Garner Files, Garner exposed the dark side of his life and career. In hindsight, everyone knew Garner as being charming and witty, but few knew of the different battles he was fighting behind the scenes. He discussed his frustration with Hollywood figures, including movie mogul Jack Warner, who Garner described as one of the rudest men he ever met. He discussed his substance use, including trying mar and substances while working in Hollywood. But it wasn't just fame and fortune. Garner's life was filled with struggles and vices that the public didn't see. Of all the relationships that Garner disclosed, his relationship with Steve McQueen stood out the most. Though their relationship was tumultuous, Garner admitted that he didn't completely throw McQueen away, but instead understood the complexity of him. As an actor who manipulated his persona more than his talent, McQueen was not without some of his own insecurities. James Garner's legacy. Garner's legacy is not only defined by his memorable characters in Maverick and The Rockford Files, but by how he dealt with the bought and paid for tough crap in Hollywood. Garner was candid in his autobiography, telling fans the truth about what he faced while making those great shows and movies. In the latter part of his life, his health started to decline, like most of us do, as his body started to give out from the rigors of a life spent being tossed around through the fight scenes he performed. He worked as much as he could, appearing in films like Space Cowboys with Clint Eastwood and Tommy Lee Jones. He learned how to cope with the challenges against him and continued to make a positive mark in Hollywood until he died in 2014. And 100% Wallace. Overall, he was more than a passive actor in Hollywood. James Garner was more a representation of grit and hard work in an industry that chewed them up and spit them out, as vast as it was. Paging through his story, we all know that we will have both good plus bad things coming along with his undesirable issues. Life is state of mind and/or acceptance. Even Hollywood's most beloved figures have their struggles. And while his rivalry with Steve McQueen was reportedly contentious, it also represented the nuances of two icons trying to survive in an otherwise unforgiving industry. So, this story about how James Garner pique your interest? What you think of rivalry? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up. Story. Oh, I